Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Michael and Mom Talk Cancer. I am your official host, Michael Kramer, and
I am the other official host. I am Ashlee Kramer. I am AKA Mom. So we have Tony Stewart. So excited. And Tony, you are here because you have, well, this is not the only reason you're here. You're here because you're an amazing guy.
Thank you.
You have a book coming out, and I think this is your first book ever. I mean, I can read. I have your whole bio in front of me. You sound like the most incredible human ever. You've made award-winning films. You've written computer software. I'm like, I think he's above our pay grade, Michael. Okay, this is your first book, though, and it is about your journey. But we want you to talk about it's about your journey with your wife. And she's the one that went through cancer. So welcome.
Thank you. And I feel very much like you're being Mom. I mean, this warmth that you're projecting is so cool. I'll take it. Even though I'm older than you, I will take it.
I doubt you're older than me. I'm not sure about that. We'll see about that. But
we'll talk about that afterwards.
But
Mom, we can talk about death, grief, cancer on the air, but ages, we'll take that off the air.
I'm always talking about age. Don't care.
Yeah.
Well, 23 plus going through cancer, we add like 80 years.
Yeah.
So he's like 100.
Yep.
And then I'm 56 plus add all the cancer and stuff. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm like learning everything. So I'm like 10.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. We're all sharing. I'm 69.
69, you look good.
You look so good. Oh my God. If people are watching on YouTube, I think they're all like, nah. And if you're listening, oh my gosh, well, you look good for 69.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, wow.
It's not that I just sort of naturally work at it, not like, whatever. But I've stayed in shape and I like swimming and I have genetic good luck that my hair didn't turn gray like my beard did years ago when I shaved my beard.
Smart.
Very, very, very smart. Okay, so tell where do we want to start? We want to get into the story because we always ask people.
Well, I want to ask you, how did you meet your spouse, your partner?
I met Lynn in the Columbia University swimming pool many years ago. I was on the rebound from a first marriage. I was 29. Lynn, I didn't know it yet, was 10 years older than me because she also looked younger than her age pretty much the whole time until cancer changed that.
Yeah.
I met her there when I was sort of talking to everyone. I'm an introvert, but believe me, on the rebound, having just been ditched by my wife of 10 years almost of relationship, I was finding myself saying hi to all the cute women that I encountered. It's amazing how that came out of me because that's not normally me. So there she was.
I'm going to get lessons from you. I'm going to get some lessons.
I
think we both need some lessons.
No, you need it more.
So I started talking to her like, hi, I usually swim in that lane. What are you doing in that lane? She assumed, that was it. That was the whole first sentence. And she assumed that I was seriously attracted to her because who the hell pays attention to other people in the swimming pool with bathing caps, all that stuff. So the next day, she answered me. She said something, I was kicking or whatever. That's why I was in a slower lane. And the next day, we both swam. We both, by coincidence, swam at the same time of day. So we would see each other on a regular basis. I had, in fact, seen her, along with many other people, in that hour of swimming for a while. The next day, she deliberately stopped at the end of the lane and pretended to be doing leg stretches, which I later learned she never did, so that I would talk to her. Because of this lovely misunderstanding, she thought I was attracted to her and that she would give me the opportunity. I saw her doing the leg stretches and wow, this woman looks cool. And I started talking to her. And
I love it.
Is how we met.
That was fate. All right. So this was your second marriage. Do you have kids?
No.
Okay.
Lynn and I tried to have kids. When that didn't happen, we decided that it wasn't important enough to us to go to in vitro. We did some other stuff. We did some medical stuff, but and also we didn't adopt. So it was clearly we kind of wanted kids, but we weren't the kind of people for whom it was that important that we would do that. And we just took that as a sign. I just tapped the mic. I hope that's okay. We just took that as a sign. Not that I'm not religious, I have to say. I'm spiritual. But when I say we took it as a sign, I'm not saying it was a sign from any particular source.
Yeah.
And we spent our lives spending the time, energy, and money that kids would have taken doing some amazing traveling, really having a lovely life for the
That's,
next 30 years.
I think that's beautiful. I don't think there's anything that you have to have kids. You don't have to have kids. We definitely talk about this with
Yeah.
Michael because infertility is an issue, but who knows?
Yeah,
I guess,
Yeah.
they'll see in the future. That's beautiful. So how long were you married?
We had been together 20 some odd years when we discovered Lynn's cancer, almost 30. And
Okay.
when she died, it was closer to 35 because
Okay.
we were lucky in that there was a 6-year period from diagnosis to when she eventually did die.
And what kind of cancer did she have?
She had, I'm going to say this because people make all these assumptions. She had what is generally called non-smoker's lung cancer.
Right.
Now, more than half of all lung cancer has nothing to do with smoking.
Right.
But people make these assumptions. They always want to have a cause, and I like to short circuit that. We didn't have any idea. So it started with intestinal discomfort. She was like not being able to hold down her food. She was having diarrhea, some acid reflux, things like that. And we started going to our doctor, sent us to other doctors, and they were all looking from the belly button down. And this went on for months as she was losing weight. Now we can all retroactively say, oh yeah, she had cancer and it was eating her up from inside. But eventually what happened was she got a knot of pain in the middle of her back that just slowly grew. And the first time she mentioned to her doctors, they said, that's referred pain. It's really happening somewhere else. You're feeling it there, but it's one of these, we'll figure it out eventually. Eventually, she went to someone to look at her back. They did a spinal MRI, and her doctor called on a Sunday afternoon to say, Lynn, you have tumors in your lung and your spine that had been growing all that time, and probably since before, when everyone was looking in the wrong place. So it was stage 4 lung cancer that had already metastasized to her spine before we knew about it.
It's amazing that she made it 6 years.
Yes. And
that's the first thing I'm thinking.
That is this huge good luck that we had, which is that first, she had a genetic mutation on her cancer. Her cancer had a genetic mutation that made it eligible for a targeted therapy drug. So, a pill, fewer side effects than chemo. But still, the stats on that were like average of 13 months, or the mean survival or success rate of that drug was 13 months. Metastasized lung cancer, where she was at, was like 6 months to a year if you just did chemo. And so, but then on top of that, and these all these twists and turns are in the book. I want to mention its name. Sorry, I just
please
know what this book is, because I'm going to keep talking about the book.
I know.
It's called Carrying the Tiger: Living with Cancer, Dying with Grace, Finding Joy While Grieving. It covers all three of those topics.
It's beautiful. I have it here, and you're right. I should have said it, but I was just so excited to talk to you.
I'm very happy to do the talking, but it's like
5 more times at least. We're gonna check it out. A lot of times.
Once now and then. But anyway,
we always look at the positives with what happened. And I'm sure you look at the positives. She survived 6 years, but do you ever look at those doctors that misdiagnosed her over those months and thought about what could have happened? Obviously you don't want to think about it, but did you ever have regrets and things you look back on that you
wish you had known?
Yeah, you wish you had known.
I do have regrets, but not about that.
Yeah.
My whole sense of medicine is that it's a crapshoot. That it isn't. It's science and art and hopeful. It's like all this stuff coming together. People who think that doctors are somehow omniscient and perfect, and that when they make a mistake you should sue them for malpractice, I think are just tearing themselves up unnecessarily.
Right.
Of course. My God, I agree with you.
Totally agree.
We have talked about this. I remember before cancer, I was I thought doctors I thought it was. I really thought, it's a science. 1 + 1 is 2. Oh, please. It is not. Of course, there's science, but it is not. Everybody is different. One
Yep.
plus one can be 4. 1 + 1 can be 0.2. There is no.
Exactly.
It is definitely an art, and there's balance, and there's just so many factors that go into it. Just like a
Yeah.
zillion. Anyway, I'll let
Yeah.
you keep going. I'll
Yeah.
let you keep
So
going.
so
Please.
later in the saga, there are things where I look back, but this is like 6 years later. The
Yeah.
first few years, which were really hard in other ways and a roller coaster, in terms of Lynn's cancer treatment and the doctors and things that happened, we had amazing good luck.
Mhm.
So it had metastasized to her spine. They said that you need to have before we can treat the cancer, this was like in the first few days of the roller coaster aspect of it.
Mhm.
Before we could treat the cancer, said the first oncologist, we have to stop that tumor that's growing in your spine because it's almost on your spinal cord. And if it keeps going, it's going to paralyze you. So that's number one. And then that very afternoon, we scrambled, and a neurosurgeon that he knew could make an opening for us. And we got in there, and he looked at it and said, I think you'd be better off with an intensive radiation single zap rather than me cutting it, because if I operate, it'll be weeks before you've recovered enough to have chemo. Everyone assumed it would be chemo at this
Right.
point. So she had the zap. It did kill the tumors in her spine. And I will just put a little pin in this map right there. That zap, plus those tumors, plus the cancer in her spine, that was the gift that kept on giving for the next 5 or 6 years. And the majority of our medical journey for the next 5 or 6 years was all based around that, which almost could have we could almost have ignored the cancer for 5 years, because in the next few weeks, through some twists and turns, we got into a clinical trial, which was a combination of this targeted drug plus an immunotherapy drug that they were trying. The manufacturer of what was then Tarceva, this was the targeted drug that was preferred for Lynn. That manufacturer was coming out with a brand new immunotherapy drug. It was in clinical trials, and they had decided to do a trial of a combo where she would get to take the drug she would have taken anyway with immunotherapy layered on top of it. And damn it, it worked. Now, working, let me just say, you guys know that I'm sure you've had many guests who talk about once you have stage 4 cancer, your definition of working and success is very different from what people imagine.
Yes.
It's the tumors stopped growing. And for the next 5 years, Lynn's lung tumors, which were the ones that we hadn't zapped, that were still sitting there, were just sort of held in place by the drugs. And she didn't have any more metastasizing or any lung cancer related symptoms until the drug stopped working 5 or 6 years later. Though the journey of the whole first part of our book is what the hell happened as a result of all this damage to her spine and the side effects and the drugs, which is a medical story and also the cancer's hanging over us emotionally the whole time.
Doesn't
it's
go
sitting
away.
right there. It's visible in every scan. And everyone said from the get-go, it's just a matter of time. It will mutate and beat the drugs, and no one knows when. So that's the whole first part of our journey. And it may be different than some people would expect in talking about living with cancer, but it was very much what it meant to us to live with cancer. After 5 years or so, the drugs did stop working. The tumors started growing. We tried other things. They failed to hold it down. And so that part of living with cancer, the 6th year, which was pretty horrible, that's what could have happened to us in the first year if these drugs hadn't worked, where the tumors got out of control.
What year was this that she was diagnosed? Because targeted therapy and immunotherapies now are really hopefully more mainstream than the chemos, depending. But what year was that?
It was 2014. At the end of 2014, Tarceva was no longer experimental. It was the first targeted drug that had been FDA approved and out of clinical trials for some years at that point. And immunotherapy of various kinds was all the rage. And targeted immunotherapy. There had been immunotherapy 10 and 20 years ago that's just sort of give your immune system some amphetamines and ramp it up. And that turned out to kill people because they had autoimmune reactions and their own immune system would kill them, and not such great success rate. Did work for some people. This was the more targeted kind where it's like, well, your tumor has this following genetic thing, so this flavor of immunotherapy might work for you. And they gave us one of those.
Yeah. When was she diagnosed exactly?
The phone call was the end of September. And so we knew we didn't have a formal diagnosis. The formal diagnosis was in October 2014. The date I remember is September 28th, the day of the phone call. That's the day our MD called and said, "You've got tumors." That's burned into my memory.
Burned. Yeah, I know, because my husband, it was December 5th of 2014.
Oh my God.
A close where we were on similar timelines as far as that goes, but he passed away very quickly.
Yeah.
He passed away within 17 months. But okay, so this book came about because I know you were sharing the story on Caring Bridge.
Yes.
Which is a beautiful website. We have many friends that use it.
Yes.
How long after her diagnosis were you comfortable sharing? Because it's so different for everyone.
It is different for everyone. And what you find in the book now, which is very emotional and has all kinds of stuff in it that is the real heart and soul of our story, it wasn't all there when we began. The sharing on Caring Bridge began almost immediately because Lynn was very popular, had a lot of friends, and loved to stay in touch with them. So the first thing she wanted to do, not the first day we were stunned. She only told her sister. We sat at the kitchen table, we held hands, we had this emotional conversation about how our lives had just ended. The life we had just ended that day, that minute, and what that was going to be. But like later, the next day, she started emailing her friends, and they flooded us with emails, and it was eating us alive to just keep up with all these emails. And someone told us about Caring Bridge and said, look, you should set up a private site and post there. So I started doing that. Lynn asked me to do the posting. She was very comfortable talking with her friends. She didn't want to keep it a secret, which was huge. But I'm just a natural writer. I'm not a natural writer of books like Carrying the Tiger. That was hard. But I'm just a natural writer. The words flow from my fingertips. And she said, could you do this? And then I would write the draft, and she'd look over my shoulder and she'd say, take out that diarrhea part, or don't tell them it hurt that much. Because she didn't want people to pity her.
Yeah.
But I started out with just these sort of factual posts. And the facts were amazing those first few weeks. It was a roller coaster whirlwind. Oh my God, do this, do that, go there. What are we going to do? Oh, what about this person we're referred to up at Yale New Haven, which is 2 hours away from us. I'm in New York City. He's a friend and he's head of oncology. Why don't you go see him? Which we did. And that actually led to the clinical trial and changed our lives. But it was all this like, what are we doing and where and how and what should we do next? That is what I was writing about at the beginning.
Okay.
And over time, our friends were so encouraging, and it felt so good to be sharing this and getting their support back. And sometimes more than support, sometimes suggestions and insight. And people who'd been through aspects of this themselves were telling us things like they've been here before. We're learning, we're following them. That I started opening up more and becoming more open emotionally in the posts. And that went on increasingly for the 5 or 6 years before we started hospice, when it became hugely emotional and when writing the posts became cathartic for me in a way that they weren't originally. It sort of grew into that over the years that I was writing them.
I can feel it right away, the fact that you connected, because I know sometimes, and often we've seen this a lot, is that when people do get that diagnosis, they isolate. And it is hard to share. And there are details you don't want to share. And you don't want pity.
Right.
You don't want pity. I think of the majority. And so it's like a fine line. I think I felt that a lot with my husband, is we didn't share. Just close friends and family knew. with Michael, it's been the opposite, but again, it was just very organic as well. We just started sharing, and then the support flooded in, and then we realized the more we shared, the more the support, and it became this. It did become a dialogue. It wasn't just us venting or talking or sharing. It was a dialogue with people. So I feel that with you, and you're so. I think that's so wise that you did it. I can't have
It's
regrets, but
it's this retroactive wisdom.
yes, it is.
It was comments from friends saying how much my posts were meant to them, especially as we got to hospice and then my grief afterwards. These deeply emotional things that I was reluctant at first to share or nervous about, but I found that I couldn't not. I had become addicted to writing about this. It was like a therapy for me. Those comments actually ended up creating the book. I mean, it was that specific set of encouragement that caused me ultimately to go forward and say, I'm going to turn all of this into a book. The book is not just the posts. And I put in all kinds of stuff that wasn't in the posts, including the pain and the diarrhea. And I wanted the book to be full of the details of what it was like. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Not I mentioned the diarrhea. I'm not going to describe it to you. Everyone has their own idea. But the fact that this was happening, the fact that it happened in a public place more than once because of the drugs caused occasionally uncontrollable diarrhea, that whatever, the emotional slog. I wanted all of that in there so that people reading this would be able to say, oh, look, all of that happened to him and her, and he made it out okay, and he isn't ashamed. And look at the comments that he got back, many of which are in the book, and look how much support he got from this. Yeah. That's part of why I wanted to share the story. But one thing I really wanted to say in response to what you just said there, Lynn didn't want people to pity her. Right. And one of the side effects of all of this writing, which turned out to be wonderful for her, was that her close friends were reading Caring Bridge. So when she saw them in person, they talked about other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
They didn't spend her in-person time, and there was a lot. I mean, she wasn't in bed for 6 years.
Right, of course.
There were several hospitalizations, several things that were really hard. One period that went on for 5 or 6 months that was really hard. But then there were years, months in between, and then a whole run of years when it all stabilized and we got out of that hard stuff while the drugs were still working. And we're going to parties, she's dancing, we're having a version of our lives back. We didn't get all of it back. Mm-hmm. There were things that are gone forever, but we still had the essence of our lives. And that was wonderful. And she's having all these interactions, and she didn't have to talk about her cancer with everyone because they read it.
Right. That's huge. That's huge. Oh, I have so many questions. I could go on, but do you want to ask?
Yeah, I mean, just what was it like? You would take care of her. Were you with her through every hospital admission? Because I know my mom
I was going to ask about family.
Just what it was like for you to go from because when you met her when you were 29 and she was 39, and you guys were younger and you were in love, and then it went from being a relationship about love to a relationship about a different love. Because my mom takes care of me and she's my mom, so it's her from you're like a mother to a son, right? It's her life is to take care of her kids and stuff, but it's different when it's a spouse or a loved one. So I just wonder how that changed your relationship with her to be caring for her.
I think that if we look at different slices of the time, I would give you different answers.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a very broad question. I was just
no. I want to follow the thread of this. There's 5 questions in there, or at least, and I'll probably not get to all of them, and I'll forget half of them.
It's fine.
When it first began, I was on my 3rd or 4th career, which was much quieter than some of the others had been. I was an administrator behind the scenes in a little nonprofit residential treatment facility for mentally troubled teenagers.
Wow.
Not an area that I was an expert in terms of actually dealing with the kids. I'm not a social worker, therapist, anything like that. But I was helping to make things work in that place. And I was very lucky. I was already fairly far along in my career. I knew a lot of things from all that I'd done. So I was like a minister, what they call a minister without portfolio. I don't know if that phrase means anything. I had no direct reports. I solved problems. I did projects. I did a
Okay.
lot of work from home. I wrote some software for them during the time I was there, but it was really perfect. I mean, people who have this happen to them, who are the spouse and have a full-time job where they have to be there all day, my heart goes out to you,
That
whoever,
was
all of you.
me.
Yeah,
That
I
was
was
me.
so lucky that
Yeah.
I had flex time. I could do a lot of work from home or from the hospital room, and I had no direct reports. I did have some meetings I had to attend. I had various things, and my colleagues totally encouraged me to take care of Lynn first and worry about work second.
Yeah.
So in that first year, which was really intense, as we were still trying to stabilize everything, and then stuff went wrong in her back, and then we had to deal with that, I did go. I was there in the hospital room with her a lot. I was at all of the early medical appointments. I was just constantly taking a half a day off here and a half day off there and saying, I got to be here. And if I had to work at 10 o'clock that night to finish up something that needed to be done, that's what I did. At the end of that year, I had a kind of breakdown, which you don't necessarily see coming when you read the book. The breakdown is very much in the book because I think it's really important. I was caregiving and giving her all of my energy, and our relationship was still very much the same in terms of like, we're in this together. And speaking to your question about how your relationship changes, we're in this together. She's like, we were very different people. I'm a planner. I'm a project planner. I've done all these big projects. So I'm there like researching cancer, researching doctors. What if we did this? What about that? Coming up with medical questions for the doctors. And Lynn is much more like not that. When she read those same websites, they freaked her out because they're full of stories of people who are dying, for whom the drugs have stopped working, and what I'm going to do next. And I was able to read those same websites and just ignore all of that. Say, we're not there. And look for the nuggets of, well, what drug did they take that worked? But increasingly, she needed support at home. I mean, she had these multiple spinal issues that went wrong during the course of that year. Although we hadn't gotten to the major operations yet at that point, but it needed more and more time. And I was getting less and less sleep. And we weren't, and in my CaringBridge posts, I was talking about her.
Of
I did
course,
not
not you.
write. Every here and there, I would get into a little something that got into how hard this was for me, but I never said it that way.
Of course
It would
not.
be how hard this was for us. We're really depressed. It feels like a slog. We don't know when this is going to turn better. The first time I wrote a post like that, I was afraid that my friends would stop reading it, and I almost didn't press the publish button. It was the first time I had ever written a post that was just totally a downer, and I got these responses back. Thank you for sharing this.
Right.
What you're dealing with is not all the good news. I want to hear the bad news too. Very encouraging. Anyway, we get through about 11 months of this. I had a series of accidents, physical accidents, a major burn, a bicycle crash, all of which I put down to my blindness and my fatigue and my focus on Lynn, that I was getting really physically careless. In the book, I actually say, I think the crash and the burn, and they were a crash and a burn, were my body's way of saying, you can't do this. I was saying to myself, the day of the bicycle accident, I was riding, and this was out in the country, a fun 2-hour exercise ride. That's what I did to unwind and get exercise on the weekends. And it started to pour, summer thunderstorm. And I kept going. And I literally was saying to myself, you can do this. You can do this. Which is, of course, what I had been saying for the whole year as it got harder and harder. Then I had this big crash, broke multiple ribs, got evacuated to a trauma center, all this kind of stuff. They put me on OxyContin. Lynn happened to be on OxyContin at the same time. Some other stuff happened in the next week. And finally, I come home. We both come home from an appointment that went badly, of hers. And we collapse on the bed, and I start to sob. I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. And for the first time, I shared with her all these things I hadn't been willing to tell her, because I thought I was going to be the big, strong guy, and I was going to hold this all in and not burden her more with what I was going through. And instead of pushing her away, she just put her arms around me and pulled me to her and said, I understand. Really, I do. And after that, I went and got a therapist, and I started paying more attention to how I had to measure what I was doing, which still fell apart when she was hospitalized and stuff, and I was running around like crazy and getting no sleep. But so that's sort of that first year. That was me trying to be the big, strong guy and hold this all together, and it was bigger than that. I couldn't do it.
Well, I'm crying right now. You can't see it, but I'm
Yeah.
crying right now because I feel that so deeply, and I feel that so deeply for so many caregivers, and that give so much. And even though, as you said, there is not really a fix either. Like
Right.
there's not a fix. And, I think the biggest thing we can do is try to go through it, move through it, express yourself. Maybe it's a therapist, whatever it is, but there is no fix, because when you're caring for someone, there are moments. I know my job, got sacrificed. And anyway, this is not about me, but I'm just relating so much to what you're saying. And you're in it together. You're in it together. And it's a different, everything Michael's been through. Like, I would do anything. I would switch places with him. When my husband, there were times I was like, oh my God, I just want to switch places with you. And you can't. But
You can't.
There are sacrifices on both ends, and it's so hard on both ends. And anyway,
I do want to also say what I think you must also have. I shouldn't say anyone else must also have experienced. All of our experiences are our own.
Right.
We got to do this for 6 years before Lynn died. And even by the time we started hospice, Lynn and I had grown so close together from going through these experiences. I look on those, and then hospice, as the best things that ever happened in my marriage. And they're all associated with Lynn's cancer and then dying. But they forged us. They made us one unit, and they made me love her and know that I loved her more than in all those previous years.
It's crazy, right? The little annoying things, they go out the window. Those, I feel you on that. And I read a few things that were just highlighted, about every kiss being alive. I read that.
Yeah.
And it's heavy and it's hard, but it's so beautiful. That was Lynn's request from you.
That was Lynn's request from me early, way before. It's in the early part of the book when I go backwards and tell you a little about the two of us. I tell the story of how we met. And then I talk about Lynn, none of which was, of course, in CaringBridge because our friends knew us. But when I realized I wanted to make Carrying the Tiger a book that other people would read, I thought, I have to introduce you to us. You have to love us. Or you have to love Lynn, because I loved Lynn. Because if you're going to go through these experiences with us, you need to be there in your soul, in your heart. And Lynn made me the person I am today, starting very early on, because she was so open in her emotions, and she wouldn't take bullshit from me, and she wouldn't let me withdraw into my shell and be a classic guy. So at dinner, she started out with, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? If there was a pause, and I would say, oh, nothing much. And she'd say, that's not possible. You have to be thinking something. Tell me what it is. And she'd get me to talk about these things that I thought were inconsequential or that I was shy to share or whatever. And then once she got past that, it was, what are you feeling? This is like therapy. She had had a lot of therapy. I had had very little. And she just wanted that from me. She had fallen for me for whatever reasons, but I hadn't been giving her this part of myself.
Well, she saw you in your bathing suit in the swimming pool.
She saw me in my bathing suit when I was a husky 29-year-old.
In that Speedo.
In my Speedo. It was, in fact. Anyway, she brought all that stuff out for 25 years before this all began.
Okay, so you were together 25 years when this started.
Or even 29 something. It's hard to, 29.
Yeah. Yeah.
when this
And
began.
isn't it crazy what you said, that then the experience of the cancer is really what, I don't know, not defined, but brought you even
Brought us,
closer. It's we always talk like cancer is like a curse and a blessing. You
yes,
know, it's the beauty and the pain.
yep,
It's I You don't want to wish it on anyone, but when you go through it, you just, so many lessons, and you just learn so much about life and perspective and relationships.
yes,
And I think you were
yes.
very honest in this book about a lot of things, and, you know, different from Michael. But I saw somewhere also a quote, like, and I don't know if this was when she was on hospice, about like, would it be easier if she passed away sooner? And I don't know if that was,
No, that was actually one of the things I said to her when I had the breakdown. That was one of the thoughts I'd been holding in during that first year, when I had no idea that she was going to live 5 more years. And we went through all of this really tough stuff. And at times, in the back of my head, I was thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be easier if she died now? If we're going to go through this kind of torture for years? Now, I did also think that again 6 years later, when the cancer was beating the drugs, and the torture was actually worse in that series of events, which I tried to compress, because I don't want people to be tortured reading the book, but I
right.
also wanted them to understand what the last 6 months were like before she decided, that's right, this is it, we need to stop. Because it's very, very hard to decide to stop treatment. It's
Very hard. Very hard.
And I wanted to talk about that and share that. So around that time, yes, in those months when it got really hard again, after several years it had been so nice, I did start thinking again, how long is this going to go on? But at that point, I was sharing those thoughts with my therapist. I didn't bring them back to Lynn. We had enough to deal with. I had someone else to tell them to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always difficult thinking about ending treatment. And, you know, we had a friend who passed away recently, and one thing was his part of his family like kind of questioned him stopping treatment, and he was gonna die anyways, but they kind of thought that if he continued treatment there was a chance he would survive. But it's so different, you know. It's just crazy to think about, you know, all the pressures that other people have from the outside.
It's not
Looking
just
in.
from the outside. One of the things I talk about in the book, and I tell the story because I do exactly describe the hours leading up to, and the phone calls, and the decision to stop treatment, and the conversation we were having. So we had a terrible day, and the tumors are going into her brain. And we come back from the hospital, and she's got a neck brace on because her neck is broken. And we've decided not to have an operation because she just had a major spinal operation a few weeks earlier, and who needs a neck operation? But if she wears a brace collar for a few weeks, it'll start to heal and she won't be in so much pain. And we come home and the phone rings, and it's the neurosurgeon's office, his nurse assistant, and we've been with them for years through multiple operations. We love them. And she says, we've got the report now. It is more than we talked about today, now that the radiologist has seen it. The tumors have gone into Lynn's brain. We think you should come back tomorrow morning to start a course of radiation. And Lynn said, in this terribly weary, broken voice, I don't want to go back to the hospital. I can't go back to the hospital. I need at least tomorrow. I don't want to go back to the hospital tomorrow. I need at least a few days at home. And the woman said, okay, we'll schedule it for 2 days from now. And she sounded disappointed, and she hung up. And Lynn and I had this conversation, which was implicitly about stopping treatment, but not explicitly about it. And I found myself saying, maybe it would be a good idea to go in just for a couple of days and have some treatment. Maybe it would make you feel stronger, and then we'll see what might happen next. And she, clearly to me in hindsight, I can't speak to exactly what I thought at the moment, but in hindsight, she was trying to please me. And she didn't want to do it, but she was starting to maybe entertain the idea. Then the phone rang again. And our oncologist, whom we'd been with for 6 or 7 years, but not the last 6 months, because Lynn had gone into a different clinical trial that was not working, our oncologist called and said, I've been looking at these reports. Maybe it's time to say enough is enough, which is the most blessed, wonderful thing that anyone ever gave, gift that anyone ever gave us, because it gave me permission to stop trying to pull Lynn back into treatment. And I had sworn I would never do that. But the pressure for me, the desire to have a few more weeks, a few more months, was so strong that despite the fact I knew very well, we had talked about it, we wanted Lynn to die at home. We did not want her to die in a hospital. And I was trying to talk her, or at least sort of, into going back to the hospital. I was entertaining this idea. And Dr. Hellman called and gave us permission not to. And Lynn listened to him, and she nodded her head and said, yeah, I'm ready. Let's stop.
Yeah. I also remember clearly our choice when Patrice went into hospice. And how long was she in hospice before she passed away? How long was she at home?
Only 2 weeks,
Yeah,
which
it's about the
surprises
same.
me when
It's about the same with my husband. It was about 2 weeks.
She was that far along before we realized it, in terms of the cancer, like going into her brain and really getting out of control. She only lived 2 more weeks, but they were my favorite 2 weeks of my whole life. And to speak to Michael's question, in these 2 weeks, I cared for her increasingly as if she were a baby, because her body was regressing down, her ability to move, her ability to take care of herself physically was going away. And I did get home aids. I did get health aids. The first week of those 2, I only had an aid during the day. And overnight, I was holding the urinal against her. We got a female urinal. These are a wonderful thing. Every woman should know there is such a thing as a female urinal. You can pee in bed into this thing without having to have a catheter or a diaper. I would hold that against her in the middle of the night and put my head against her leg and just breathe her scent. And it was wonderful. I would wipe her bottom and do things like that. And eventually she was in diapers, and eventually we had aides doing those kinds of things. And I almost kind of missed it, but it meant that I could get more sleep. We had an aide sitting in the bedroom with us all night long. And I found that when Lynn needed to pee or something in the middle of the night, I would kind of half wake up, and the aide would take care of all these things that the first week I had to do. And I would just sort of hold her hand. And then I would fall asleep so much more easily. I wasn't responsible for making it work. But it was, we never had kids. I have never raised a baby and fed a baby and bathed a baby. But as far as I could tell in terms of the emotions, this is as close as I'm ever going to get. As I loved Lynn, as she left me in that way physically. She was there all the way to the end. I was communicating with her one way or another. The last few days she could hardly talk, but she was very much with me until the end, which is a gift not everyone gets.
Okay, Carrying the Tiger. Tell us the title, why it's called Carrying the Tiger.
Oh, yes. So just a few weeks in, at the very start, we're sending these posts out on Caring Bridge. We're letting Lynn's friends know. One of Lynn's friends wrote to her and said something like, in my Tai Chi group, we carry a tiger to help friends who are facing difficult circumstances. The 3 motions of bending low, lifting the tiger, and putting it on a hilltop far away represent that act of taking something that's scary and difficult and making it manageable. Because a tiger is not so scary if he's on that hilltop far away. And Lynn replied to her friend, that's wonderful. Could you teach me how to carry tigers?
That's Beautiful. I've never heard that. That's absolutely,
Neither have I.
that's gorgeous. That's
And
beautiful.
neither of us did Tai Chi, and we hadn't heard it either. And funny thing, I put that in the book early on. I quote the email and Lynn's response, and there's actually a little more, because then another friend on Caring Bridge said, who had stage 4 cancer herself, said, "That's great, and I'll have one of those tigers too." And I wrote back, replying to her comment, "Everyone who reads these posts is helping us carry our tiger."
I love it.
It just all happened spontaneously. So then I write the whole book. I spent months agonizing over what the title should be. I got all these titles. I have a whole page. In fact, it's multiple pages, one title after another that I tried. I would put them on the top of the manuscript. It didn't occur to me that this thing was sitting there waiting for me until one day I was out riding my bike in Maine with Lynn, with Cordy, my girlfriend, in a beautiful place. And it just suddenly came to me, oh my God, the title has been in my book the whole time. I just need to pull it out and put it on the front. And I've never looked back. It's 3 subtitles, each of which was a different challenge. Learning to live with cancer, die with grace, find joy with grieving. They're all in different parts of the book, and each of them is like a different tiger.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Living with grace is a big one. Living with grace is also a big one. And grief and joy, that you can have both. That has been a huge part of our journey, is realizing and losing someone you love. And you literally just said girlfriend, and like, that's beautiful. You can still love Lynn. You can still share this story, and it changes nothing if you have love in your life now. I think grief and joy, a lot of times we have a lot of guilt as caregivers, even first having lost someone, and even with Michael, going through it, like, grief and joy can live together. And I think it's hard. We have a lot of guilt around that in our society, and we can have both. We can have both.
That's a really important part of the message of the book.
Yeah.
There's joy, of course, earlier too. There's joy here and there during the cancer journey, during the part where she was alive.
Yes.
There's a beauty to the hospice that I've talked about. And in the last part, which is the shortest part of the book in a way, because I think people are well, they're getting to the end of this. I don't want to stretch this out. So in page count, it's the shortest part, was the complication and guilt of meeting Cordy, my girlfriend, while I was still hugely grieving Lynn. I still grieve Lynn. You grieve for the rest of your life. That does not stop. It's just a question of how you deal with it and internalize it and turn it into something that brings back smiles and warm memories rather than all those tears.
Right.
But when I met Cordy, we hadn't even had Lynn's memorial yet. It was really soon. We met as acquaintances, talking about when I invited her to the memorial. I sent her an email because I had a connection to her for various reasons. And we started talking about a grief, a loss in her life. And we connected over talking about grief. She lived 1,000 miles away. I didn't know what she looked like. This was not like falling for her in the normal sense. We connected from talking about grief. We eventually did get together, go to bed together. And oh my God, was I guilt-stricken.
Of course.
And this, despite the fact that Lynn and I had talked about how she would like me to have another girlfriend someday. It was her word, girlfriend, that I'm still using. We were 50 and 60 years old at the time. But the complication of allowing yourself to have another relationship while it coexists with the grief is what the last chapter of the book is very much about.
Yeah. And of course, we've had lots of fun on this cancer journey. We've had fun in the hospital. He's been admitted for 5 months straight, so much you. But wait, talking about grief and joy, we have to get to a few, like,
we have to have some joy.
We have to have some fun questions at the end here, because we always like to end with fun questions. Getting to know you, Tony, for a second.
Yeah, what's your favorite book? Because you just wrote a book.
You just wrote a book. It can't be yours. I mean, it could be yours, I guess.
No, it is totally not my book. I know everything that's wrong with it, etc. I have several favorite books from different periods in my life.
Yeah.
50 years ago, well, not quite 50, I just loved Shogun. That was the
I
book.
read I love that series of books. I read them and
They
loved
came out with
them.
a show of it recently.
I
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
but
they did a show 30 years ago, and now they recently did Hulu did a version that
Yeah.
has like Japanese act. I mean, it's
Mhm.
much
yeah,
more Japanese than the American version from
but
30
I
years ago.
love those books. We
Those
just
books are
bonded. Yes,
fantastic.
fantastic. Oh my God, I read
So
that series multiple times, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And if we skip forward through decades of reading all kinds of stuff, um, I am in love with a book that does relate to the topic we're on, which is the book Being Mortal by
Okay.
Atul Gawande, which is such a beautiful nonfiction exploration of these kinds of topics that in our society we don't talk about. Guess what? Everyone's going to die. We are
Guess what?
all mortal.
Yeah.
Why don't we integrate that into our lives, into how we plan our lives, into how we think about these things all the way along? Which is what I'm trying to do with my book, which is what you're doing with your podcast.
Yeah.
But I read that book 3, 4, 5 months, the summer after Lynn died. And it just spoke to me. Of course, I was reading it at a tender time. It's one of the first books. I hadn't been able to read a book for a few years at that point. I just couldn't do it. I was a voracious reader for most of my life. And these last few years with Lynn, I didn't do it. And then this was one of the first full books that I read. So I would say couldn't be more different from Shogun.
But awesome. Love it.
And
Okay.
right now, I am absolutely in love with another nonfiction book, The Warmth of Other Suns,
I don't
which
know that.
came out about 20 years ago by Isabel Wilkerson, which is a beautifully written description of the Great Migration. That is the movement of Black Americans from the South to the North in the first 3/4 of the 20th century. And it
Okay.
is one incredible story after another that I am learning so much from and so enjoying reading. And that's what I'm reading right now. There have
I
been a lot
love
of
it.
other books in between, but
I know, of course. All right. If you had a magic wand. No, let's do superhero power.
I was going to, you want to do
Because
superhero?
magic wand,
Yeah, what's a superpower you wish you had?
what's
That's
a
a fun one.
superpower you wish you had?
I wish I could heal people's grief.
Heal their grief. But do you want to heal their grief,
But
or do you
I
think?
should say, by the way, this is a horrible phrase, healing, in
Yeah,
terms
yeah,
of
it
grief.
is.
It is, I just want to say
Yeah.
for all the listeners, yes, it just popped out of my mouth. What I mean by heal is to make them comfortable with it and to be able to
Oh
find
yeah,
happiness
perfect.
again. Just to be
Yeah.
clear.
Not to get rid of it, because I think as a mom, that's like a huge lesson. But I think that this isn't just a mom. This is this is anyone in the world, that we want to take pain away from the people we love, right?
Yeah.
But they have to go through their pain to become whatever they're going to be, whatever that is.
Yeah.
We have to
So,
go through pain.
this is so funny. What would this superpower be? It would be some way to help that person find their way into the process that will let them get through their grief.
Yeah.
Because so many people get kind of stuck
Give people
under
permission.
assumptions and misunderstandings and societal expectations and whatever. And everyone's grief is different. And what will help a person heal is different. So I wish I had a superpower that would help people get past that stuck, horrible spot more quickly, more
I
smoothly.
think you want to be like super therapist. It would be
Yeah, I
like,
think
I can
so.
just see you in the tights and it's like super therapist.
Yeah. Because when you asked the question, when you started with the magic wand and all, I'm thinking, well, if I brought Lynn back to life, what would I do about Cordy?
Yeah.
You know,
can't do
it's
that.
really complicated now. Cordy is very happy for me to have Lynn in my heart. That's part of what attracted
She's got
her to
21,
me.
man.
I know
That's
you
what
have a lot of women, 2 wives, girlfriend.
Yeah,
I'm so jealous right now.
I've had 3 major long-term relationships plus other, college girlfriend and stuff. But yes, I was married in my 20s, and she did me the world's biggest favor by divorcing me. Although I totally did not know it.
I think
But
you're
because
flexing on
she-
Michael, though.
Because she had the guts to say, this isn't working for me. And I wanted her I said, let's do therapy. Let's do counseling. Let's make this work. And she had the guts to say, I don't really think that you're the right person for me. This is after we'd been together 9 years and been married for 2.5. As a result of that, I met Lynn.
Right.
And Lynn was much more the right person for me. And I was much happier and more comfortable with Lynn than I had ever been with Deborah, although I think Deborah's a wonderful person. You can't, I don't even remember how I started this answer.
Because we're talking about bringing Lynn back, and you couldn't finish 40, but you've had 3 relationships.
That's right.
And that is the lesson. It's like what we think of as something that maybe failed or that didn't work out. It's opening the door for something else. And
Everything.
you learn every grieving process, as you said, the healing it's not about taking away the pain, but it's about finding a way to use the pain or heal from it, for sure.
Interesting kind of little scientific side note. I attended a happiness conference, online happiness conference, a few months after Lynn died. And I mentioned this, like all of 4 paragraphs in the book.
Okay.
And put on by the Atlantic magazine. And they've got a columnist who talks about like living your life. And it was wonderful. But it alternated between scientific-oriented speakers who like do brain scans and more holistic people. The science is that grief and joy, happiness and sadness live in different parts of your brain. They're not in the same part of your brain. The idea that being happy means you can't be sad completely misunderstands the science of it.
Exactly.
So in hearing that, I immediately thought, cool, I bet grief and joy live in these different parts of your brain.
Yeah.
And of course they can coexist.
I'm going to say, was that with Arthur Brooks?
Yes, it was with Arthur Brooks.
Love that man. Okay. I do a lot of stuff. I do a lot with happiness. So I feel that. All right. Do we go to our signature question?
Yes,
Mr.
you ask
Kramer?
it.
Okay.
I'll give you the permission.
I'm nervous here.
No, not at all.
A lot of pressure here.
No pressure at all. Or you knew that tomorrow were your last day. What would you do today?
Unfortunately, Cordy is out of town.
It doesn't matter. This is a wish.
You can fly.
I would go into nature.
Okay.
I would go into nature and spend a couple of hours just observing and feeling and smelling and breathing. I know in my heart that I have lived a full life. Lynn and I talked about this when she was dying. Mm-hmm. Now I've lived even more of a full life because this journey I'm on right now, I'm writing the book, doing these conversations, is incredible for me. I love it. And I'm sharing something. And if I'm going to die tomorrow, I've done lovely things with my life. I've touched people. I've helped people. I've had fantastic experiences. Let me go just enjoy the beauty that's all around us.
Beautiful. Well, we agree about that.
That was amazing. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being on our podcast. That was amazing.
Carrying the Tiger, and I'm going to get everything right. Carrying the Tiger, Living with Cancer, Dying with Grace, Finding Joy While Grieving by Tony Stewart. And it's coming out April
29th. It's in broad distribution as not only in print, the ebook, of course, and also I did an audiobook. And I recorded the whole story. I read it myself, which was a hugely beautiful experience, bringing everything back. After a year of writing the book, which became increasingly about craft and editing, and is this the right word? When I pulled back and just read it for the microphone and tried to make it come alive, I was crying. You don't hear that, but it really came alive for me again, and it reminded me of all those feelings and what this was all about. So yes, the audiobook is out there too, and they're in broad distribution, just like your podcast. It's like they're all those places you think of. If you go there, you will find my book too.
Thank you so much. What a joy to have you. Thank you for sharing. We related so much to so much.
You're really welcome, and thank you for doing your podcast, which is a beautiful thing, and for inviting me and like I love this. I love being asked these questions. You make me think. You make me feel. And we're sharing something with all the listeners, which I really appreciate.
Me too. You made me cry like multiple times. It was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony.
It's an official goodbye from your host, Michael Kramer, and
the other official host, Ashlee Kramer. And thank everyone for listening. Thank you, Tony, for agreeing to be here and sharing your heart with us so openly. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And in the notes, I will have the title, links to everything. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.